This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history, including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 41. Christians in Antioch. Claudius invades Britannia. As we heard in episode 30, the church in Antioch was experiencing growth, and it was there that they were first distinguished as Christiani, or Christians, named such because of their belief in Jesus as the Christ, the anointed of God. Their belief that Jesus was the Messiah, the Christ, was accompanied by charitable works for others. In a time without a social safety net, Christians cared for others precisely because of their belief that Jesus was the Messiah. The Christians were introducing a new way of living. Based on the teachings of Jesus and how he interpreted Mosaic law, Christians took care of the poor, the widowed, the orphan, and the sick. They recalled that Jesus had said that he would be with them always, and that how they treated the least among them is how they treated Jesus himself. Rather than propitiate the gods, as much of Greco-Roman religious practice had it, Christians worshipped and showed reverence for God by serving others. They recalled that Jesus cited the prophet Hosea in saying, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." Antioch, with about 150,000 inhabitants, was the third largest city of the empire after Rome and Alexandria. As a cosmopolitan city with its links to Jerusalem and its Greek-speaking population, it fostered creativity and innovation in its approach to the way, not only with its ethic of sharing, caring for others, and radical hospitality, but also with its theology, or way of thinking about Jesus, Judaism, Gentiles, and God. This way of being attracted middle and upper-class people as well, who would share their material possessions and resources. In Antioch, not only Jews, but also Gentiles came to accept that Jesus was sent by God and that he was God's anointed one. Whether Jewish or Gentile Christian, they gave freely for the good of the community, knowing that Jesus was returning soon in any case. He was the first fruits of the general resurrection. His being raised from the dead meant that they were at the end of an age. God's reign would be established soon, and therefore material wealth meant little in the face of the life to come. Those followers of the way in Jerusalem heard about the number of people joining the movement in Antioch. So, to learn more and to ensure proper oversight, they sent Barnabas, the Cypriot, who had sold a piece of property and given the proceeds to the apostles for distribution. Barnabas knew some of the other Cypriots who had come from Jerusalem to Antioch, and he was pleased with the growth in Antioch. To assist him with his work in this cosmopolitan city, he sought out the multilingual Jewish Roman citizen who had witnessed the risen Christ, Saul. Barnabas had reconciled Saul to the church in Jerusalem, which Saul had previously ravaged, entering house after house and dragging out both men and women whom he handed over for imprisonment. It was no small task to assist in resolving these significant differences. Saul, the arch-persecutor, had become a true believer. The church in Jerusalem was understandably hesitant in believing that story, so Barnabas had served a significant role as he had facilitated in this reconciliation, after which, as we heard in episode 34, Saul went back to his hometown of Tarsus in Cilicia, sailing there from Caesarea Maritima. He visited that region as well as Cyprus and Syria. Saul was his Jewish name, but he went by Paul in Greco-Roman circles. It was fairly common to have a Jewish or Semitic name and a Greco-Roman name. As we heard in episode 24, Tarsus was the capital of Cilicia, and was known in part because Alexander the Great nearly drowned there centuries earlier. It was annexed to the province of Cilicia by Pompey in 67 BCE, and Cleopatra and Mark Antony first met there in 41 BCE. Because Antony used the city as a major base and it had supported Caesar in the civil wars, Tarsus had been granted the status of a municipium, that is, a free city exempt from taxation. This also meant that most of its residents were granted Roman citizenship, something that had been confirmed by Augustus himself. So by the time Paul was born in the first decade of the first century, he was considered a Roman citizen. All of this is to say that Barnabas went to Tarsus, spoke with Paul about the proposed work, and brought him to Antioch. Together, they would stay for a year, teaching the people and building up the community of believers there. There were Christian teachers and prophets in Antioch, including Menachem, who was a close friend and childhood companion of Herod Antipas. Menachem had been present at the dinner party where Salome asked for the head of John the Baptist. And from the court of Antipas, Menachem was privy to the inner workings of the political scene in Judea, Galilee, and the surrounding area. After Antipas and his wife had made their unsuccessful case before Caligula for a larger kingdom, as we heard in episode 31, they were exiled to Lyon. Menachem had sympathies with the followers of the Way, known now as Christians, and became one of them. Other prophets and teachers of the Antiochian Christian community included Barnabas, who had come from Jerusalem, Simeon, who is called Niger, Nicholas of Antioch, one of the 7, Lucius of Cyrene, and of course, Paul himself. In Jerusalem, followers of the Way were now also referred to as Christians, just as they were in Antioch. The Jerusalem Christians continued to expect the imminent return of Jesus. They shared stories, they remembered some of his teachings, especially those wherein he talked about the household not knowing the day or time of the return of the Master. Upon reflection, they understood that that story had really referred to Jesus' own return, and how the day or time of his return was unknown, but it would likely be soon. The Christians spent their time in prayer and in fervent expectation of his coming. Their prayer was simply, Maranatha, which meant in Aramaic, Our Lord, come. In 43, Claudius determined to advance the frontiers of the empire by attacking Britannia. He knew about Caligula's failed attempt, where he led troops to the seashore only to capture seashells as booty. That was more of a farce than anything. Claudius could extend the boundaries of the empire in the first actual assault on Britannia since Julius Caesar. Claudius's brother had been a hero due to his victories in Germany, and had been given the title and name Germanicus. So Claudius thought it was a great idea to lead the assault on Britannia. To assist with the invasion, Claudius appointed Vespasian legionary commander. Vespasian, that rising star who had been made a senator a few years earlier, decided at that time to break off his affair with Canis, the freedwoman and secretary of Antonia, Claudius's mother. Vespasian had been the object of Caligula's derision for failing to show sufficient enthusiasm for Caligula's theatrical performances and games. But now with Claudius on the throne, things were better for Vespasian. He had recently married Flavia Domitilla, and together they already had 2 sons, Titus, born in 39, and Domitian, born in 40. They would eventually have a 3rd child, Domitilla the younger, in 51. To command another legion, Claudius appointed the general Aulus Plautius, whose wife, Pomponia Graecina, was still in mourning for her good friend and Claudius's own niece, Julia Livia, who had been convicted without an advocate and condemned to beheading at the instigation of Messalina, as we heard in the last episode. To say Pomponia Graecina was still in mourning meant that she still wore the dress of someone in that state, when it was well past respectable time to do so. But that didn't matter to her. She wanted to make a statement. To handle essential matters of state in his absence while he was in Britannia, Claudius appointed Vitellius, who was named consul for the 2nd time. So Claudius set off for Britannia with his generals and their legions. Even the senior senator Asiaticus, whose wife was basically assaulted and raped by Caligula at a dinner party the princeps hosted, also accompanied the expedition. Asiaticus was the one who stood before the Senate after Caligula's assassination to say that even though he had not been part of the conspiracy, he would have been had he known about it. Claudius spent just over 2 weeks in Britannia itself before returning victorious. The campaign was quick, with Claudius away from the city for a total of about only 6 months. The Roman general Aulus Plautius performed so admirably that Claudius named him the first governor of the new province, and he served from 43 to 46. The Senate voted honors for Claudius, Messalina, and their son, who was renamed Britannicus. Octavia, their daughter, did not receive such honors, as she was a girl. The Senate further voted in favor of a triumph, which happened early the following year. Aside from Caligula's double triumph, Claudius consoled himself by thinking that this was the first true triumph in Rome since his own brother Germanicus had his in 16 CE. During the triumph, Messalina was in the second chariot, which again was authorized by a vote from the Senate. She was at the height of her power, nearly 35 years younger than her husband. Next time, we'll hear about Agrippina and her husband Passienus and their son returning to Rome, and we'll review a few of the intertwined members of the imperial family.